Our focus wasn't solely on the business we ran, but rather on our family. We discovered the strength that lies within to overcome obstacles and serve God. It began centered around the lumber, but our journey ultimately became about creating a legacy. Brand Vaughan Lumber Company was started in 1946 by my grandfather, Cy Vaughan, and his cousin, R.L. Brand. And it was created to provide building products and installed services to home builders and contractors. My grandfather was somebody who valued relationship, and he was very focused on how do we provide value, knowing that without value, your worth can come and go very quickly. From the beginning, my grandfather's goal was to service customers well, and it started as a very small business in Southwest Atlanta. What it grew to was something with 6 locations across the state of Georgia, 250 people, and $200 million in revenue, something that my grandfather could have probably never imagined, but would have been incredibly proud of. So the mission statement of Brand Vaughan Lumber Company is to deliver extra mile service and leave a positive impression through our commitment to the principle, strength lies within. In order to understand how we got here, you really have to go back to the beginning. Cranston Hayden Vaughan, better known as Cy, was born in Heflin, Alabama. He had 2 younger sisters. His father worked on the railroad, and his mom worked as a teacher in a one-room schoolhouse. His father passed away when my grandfather was in his early teens, and it just meant suddenly he had to be part of providing for the household. So he would jump on a train, go to the next town, and pick blackberries for a nickel a bushel. And so as he continued to do that and grow up, they wanted to provide more education and opportunity for his life. So they moved my grandfather in with his uncle, who lived in Hapeville, Georgia. And his Uncle Dave owned a lumberyard called Hapeville Lumber Company. And so while living there with his Uncle Dave and his 3 daughters, he learned the lumber business. One of Dave's 3 daughters had a husband named R.L. Brand, and my grandfather and Mr. Brand had become good friends. R.L. owned a grocery store, and so he knew how to run a business. And so they got together and decided to open up Brand Vaughan Lumber Company on the southwest side of Atlanta. So that first year in 1946, when my grandfather and R.L. started the company, started in June, and in that first year, they sold $212,000 in material, which was amazing for a startup, and they just realized that they were onto something. In 1947, they grew from $212,000 to over $600,000 in sales year over year. Really just proved the point that if you built a good business with good people and core principles that take care of the people around you, that they had the opportunity to grow that business.
My name is Allison Monahan. I've been here, August was 20 years. I have had the honor of working for all 3 generations, and it definitely was an honor. Mr. V, he's the epitome of a Southern gentleman. He never had a shut door all day long. You know, people would come in just to see his smile. He would always have a kind word, would always ask after your family, knew your kids' names, just made it a point to make you feel special.
So in the early days of Brand Vaughan, as they were building the business, some of the struggles that my grandfather and RL faced was, how do you manage this business as you're trying to grow it? And so one of my favorite pictures of them is my grandfather and RL standing in a rail car unloading roofing, and they've got coveralls on. and it's zipped halfway down. And under those coveralls was their suit and tie. So they would stand at the counter, greeting customers and serving customers. And then when the rail car would come in, they'd put those coveralls on, jump in the back of a rail car, and unload roofing. My grandfather was one of the best men I've ever known. He was kind, he was humble, he was generous, he was a hardworking person. He taught me so many things. As my grandfather and RL had grown the business, it got to about 1976. And Mr. Brand had been involved in some other businesses in the community and some commercial real estate. He decided it was time for him to leave Brand Vaughan. So he went to my dad, who had just gotten out of law school at the University of Georgia and had a job lined up in Marietta with a law firm. And he said, "Chip, I'm going to get out of the business. And your father can continue to run the business. He either may sell it or liquidate it, but this is your opportunity to come in and partner with him. I'll sell you the business over 10 years. I'll work with you for a year to help you understand what you need to do. But if you don't come in now, there's a chance you won't have the opportunity to come in." And so my dad decided to say, "Okay, I'll give this a year and see how it goes." And it was a tough transition in, but my father grew to love the business and love the industry, and it's something he continues to love to this day. The second generation of our business was my dad, Chip Vaughan. He was an only child, grew up in Southwest Atlanta, and went to Georgia Military Academy, which became Woodward Academy. So my dad has the conversation with RL and decides that he's going to try Brand Vaughan. As my dad got integrated into leadership, my grandfather handed over some of the responsibilities to my dad. My dad set up the first outside sales team. Before that, we'd all been walk-in business and local contractors that we had relationships with, and he started the first outside sales program. So over the years, as Brand Vaughan had grown in influence, they also wanted to grow in geography. And so in 1994, my dad took the opportunity to buy a lumber yard on the north side of Atlanta in Lawrenceville called Brand Lumber Company. And it gave us an opportunity to have a presence on the north side of the city. He also opened up a sales office in Conyers that allowed us to continue to expand our sales team. So this expansion allowed us to grow financially as well. My dad had a really good business mind for how to hire and place talented people and leverage skills that we didn't have internal within Brand Vaughan. So his ability to find, hire, and retain talent gave us an advantage that we had not prior had. So as we grew in those two locations, they weren't necessarily ideal in either size of the location and ability to scale and grow. So in 1998, we bought a facility in Tucker, Georgia, which was strategically located near 285, 85, 78, and 400. Tucker is almost 11 acres on a flat lot with a rail line in it. With additional warehouse space and yard space, we were able to develop new programs like our engineered wood program, our door shop, building our interior door and trim business in a more meaningful way. Additional warehouse, additional yard, and rail gave us a distinctive to be able to go after the larger production builders that we didn't have before that. Even as we were growing, my father maintained the principles that RL and my granddad had started. They talked about never leveraging the present for the future. And because of that, we were always very good stewards of the people and the capital assets that we had, and it allowed us to scale and grow in a way that was meaningful, profitable, and sustainable. So after I went to the University of Georgia, I went and I got a job at Georgia Pacific. So in my 4 years at Georgia Pacific, I learned an incredible amount about manufacturing, about distribution, about big business. It allowed me to get some insight and some leadership experience around finance, leadership, inventory management, all the things that were incredibly helpful for me once I got back to the family business. In 2006, I had the opportunity with Georgia Pacific to take an area sales manager position, which would have meant moving our family to Colorado. At the same time, there was an opportunity to come back to Brand Vaughan to take over for a outside sales rep who was leaving the company and wanted to transition well and transition his accounts. So my dad and I had a conversation, and we decided it was time for me to rejoin Brand Vaughan Lumber. And so I did in December of 2006, transitioning in as an outside sales rep and taking over the accounts that the sales rep was leaving as he was transitioning away from Brand Vaughan. I didn't have direct experience in outside sales, and so the person I took over for worked with me for a month to transition a lot of the relationships and some of the knowledge about how to go about being an outside sales rep in our industry. Of all of the accounts that were transitioned to me through this previous salesperson, within 12 months, the top 5 were all out of business. So as those companies were going out systematically through the global financial crisis, I had to start to try to reinvent myself as a salesperson, finding different methods to connect with customers, different ways to bring revenue to the business. And while it was probably the most challenging part of my career, I also learned the most, the fastest about the industry through that process.
My name is Adnan Kusa, and I've been with Brand Vaughan for the last 5 years now. Every single day, I wake up in the morning, I drive to work with joy because I know I'm going to meet really good people I love, I like. I spend time here more than I spend time with my family, you know. It's a great place to work.
And when you meet John, he's like, even if he's having a bad day, he really don't show it, but he always try to grab you and embrace you and tell you hi.
He's one of the smartest people I know. He brought us into the 20th century with technology. He brought us the 100 families in 100 years to keep the legacy of giving and faith going. And I think that's something that brings us together and that we'll have going forward.
John have done so many things for me. I never asked John for anything that you refuse. And you never ask question. When I tell you anything, you always tell me, Haji, I'm gonna take care of it. When you tell me I'll take care of it, it's not a day. It will be less than an hour, and you will call me, but I'm done with it.
I remember in 2009 walking around the lumberyard with my dad one day, done with shipping by about 11 o'clock during the day, and just looking around these 10 acres and saying, what are we gonna do with this place? There was just no way to cut cost fast enough to be able to cut to profitability. And so as we started to figure out what does next look like, we ended up in the office of a bankruptcy attorney, understanding what, if things didn't turn around, what options may look like. When we were talking to the bankruptcy attorney, we had actually hired on some salespeople from a competitor, and that competitor was suing us. And they were trying to sue us right into what we were talking about with this attorney. And to think about in those moments, sitting in that attorney's office, about the, at that time, 70 plus years of experience of Brand Vaughan, and knowing all that had gone into making it to that point after the downturn, it was incredibly scary and sad to think about the legacy ending in that way. Not on our terms, not in our control, in a manner that would not be helpful to our team members. The market slowly started to improve, but because we had made the decision to be aggressive in the market, we positioned ourselves to grow faster than the market grew back. That's when we started opening up new locations. So in 2011, we opened up our Columbus facility. 2 years later, in 2013, we opened up our Madison facility. Another year later, we opened up our Cumming facility. And then 3 years after that, in 2017, we opened up our door shop in Peachtree Corners. So as the momentum began to build, we built both a structure, a leadership team, and a culture around the flywheel concept, that we could get the flywheel going, and as we get the right people in the right spots, and we take care of our customers the right way, that it would just continue to grow. And what we saw was, we weren't ever trying to be the biggest, we were trying to be the best. And the better that we got, the more customers demanded that we grow with them. And that concept that had come down from generation 1 to generation 2 to generation 3 was that flywheel that continued to run. It allowed us to continue to grow and scale, attract the best and brightest people, and retain them in a meaningful way. As we started to scale and grow, what we determined was it was going to be harder than we thought to maintain culture across locations and geography with new people and new processes. So we determined we wanted to understand what our culture looked like to our people, and also how do we stack up as a small business. So we signed up to try to qualify as a top place to work through the AJC, thinking that through these surveys, we would find out we're the best place to work in Atlanta, even as a lumberyard. And what it ended up leading to was a journey of discovery about our culture and what it really meant and how to drive culture well. And then 2020 hit, and we're sitting there in mid-March and the world shuts down. And all of a sudden, we were transported back to 2009, where my dad and I are walking around the facility in late March, and there's no trucks out on the road at 11 o'clock because everybody had stopped everything that they were doing. I remember sitting down with our CFO and my dad and doing cash burn rates to determine how long would our business last if our builders, who were very concerned, stopped paying us. And what we determined with those cash burn rates is that we had grown the business to such a scale that very quickly we would have been in a very tough situation, making some very hard decisions. And with my dad and I being the only partners within the business, it was all going to have to come from us to determine how to manage through that process. Do we go Brand Vaughan 2.0 and double down with our investment? Do we look for somebody to come in and partner with us? Or do we find somebody who wants to come in and buy Brand Vaughan Lumber? Through that process, we determined that the best path for us to go forward would be to find a partner that would buy Brand Vaughan Lumber. We'd gotten to the scale and the size that continuing to invest in that way would have created more of a burden than a blessing within our business. We determined that we wanted to partner with USLBM. USLBM was started by LT Gibson in 2009 with the goal of consolidating businesses within our industry, allow them to maintain their name, their brand, their leadership team, and their culture at a local level, and come alongside with additional resources and central services that help enhance the experience of the employees. The way that LT talks about culture and talks about people aligned with how we talk about culture and we talk about people. So we felt like that he would be a good steward of the culture that we had built over the years at Brand Vaughan. In April of 2021, we signed a letter of intent with USLBM to close by July 1st, 2021. Trying to think through what does it look like to not have a family business in our hands anymore was challenging, but we knew it was worth walking through that. So one day I was thinking about what would my grandfather and my grandmother say about this, because that was so important to me. I decided to go to their grave. And I, thinking about it, walked up to his grave and I looked at his headstone. And what it said was, Cranston Hayden Vaughan Sr., loving father, loving husband, loving grandfather. What I noticed within that was, it said nothing about the business. That's not what was most meaningful and important to him. It was as a husband, it was as a father and a grandfather. And in that moment, I knew that the decision that felt like the Lord was leading us to was the right decision, that my grandfather would be proud.
The bricks that Chip and John lay when I came here, still, those bricks are still there that I'm still walking on. And the reason why I say that, because it's never a day you could see Chip or John and they would say, oh, they would pass by you. They would always stop and say hi. Actually, this is the first time I ever worked for a company where the leaders know my name before I even met them.
You know, everything starts from the foundation. You can't build a house without proper foundation. The foundation that John and Chip built here, that's what making me happy, and that's what make me, anytime they got problem, I always here. I don't hesitate. That's made me proud to come to work every day.
I'm so proud of Brand Vaughan's ability to keep the culture with our growth, and it's not easy to keep the culture and the values as well with adding more team members and adding more locations. So that was a challenge, and I believe we've been through that challenge successfully.
This company seen me have a kid, get married, buy my first house this year. Like it's
awesome.
It's amazing, man.
You've always known it's so important to put family first and allowed me to do that. And it's made me that much more loyal to Brand Vaughan and wanting to stick around. You know, there have been tough times, a downturn, and never once did I think about going someplace else and leaving here because of you. So I appreciate everything you've done and taking that chance.
You don't see many people that own companies that treat their employees like they do.
It changed my life and my family's life forever. And honestly, I don't have enough words to express how thankful I am.
Right now, like, I'm over the door shop. I do the same thing like what Chip and John do. Every morning I get in, even though I pass everybody in the break room and I say morning to everybody, I still walk the floor to each and every individual and tell everybody morning.
I want to tell you thank you, Chip. Thank you very much. Bringing me in here, it takes a lot of pressure on me and it makes me happy. I was going to hospital most of the time, but now because of you and your son, I'm here today happy and my family is happy.
The business wasn't just about the lumber. It was about the legacy. People talk to me a lot about being in a family business. It can be messy and it can be difficult, but it can also be wonderful.